Welcome to the Explainer. You know, if there's one thing that is absolutely 100% guaranteed to start a massive, fiery debate among basketball fans, it's the all-time great rankings. I mean, the second a major sports publication drops an updated list, absolute chaos ensues. Today, we're taking a pretty fascinating journey. We're going to look at the highly subjective, fiercely debated nature of modern all-time sports rankings, and then we're firing up the time machine. We're going back to the raw, unfiltered dominance of the 1960s to look at two men whose monumental legacies are somehow getting totally lost in the shuffle.
To really untangle this, we have to start with the ultimate basketball question. How do we actually rank the greatest players of all time? Do we weigh stats heavily, championships, just the sheer eye test? It's a question that drives fans totally crazy, especially when outlets like Bleacher Report randomly drop these updated top 20 lists that seem to just arbitrarily shuffle legends around.
To give you a real sense of the visceral frustration modern fans have with these ever-changing historical rankings, just look at this reaction from a user on the NBA Talk subreddit reacting to a recent Bleacher Report list. Using the internet slang nephews, which just means naive or maybe younger fans, they said, "Different nephews, same garbage takes." It really perfectly captures that pure exhaustion fans feel when a new panel of writers completely upends established basketball history just a couple of years after the last list came out.
And people are super quick to point out the baffling inconsistencies here. As another Reddit user pointed out, wait, Steph was at number 10 even before 2022? And his 2022 ring did nothing to raise his ranking? Flaw, what a joke fest. It highlights a massive, glaring flaw in modern rankings. You have active players who achieved the literal ultimate goal, winning another championship, and yet somehow their historical standing remains completely stagnant. No movement at all.
Then you have the flip side, which honestly is just as weird. Fans are constantly pointing out the sheer absurdity of retired players randomly moving up the ranks. Take Julius Erving, the legendary Dr. J. He retired almost 4 decades ago. Yet, as users pointed out, he somehow magically entered the top 20 list in recent years when he wasn't there before. What exactly did he do to randomly move up without playing a single new game?
Okay, let's rewind a bit to Bill Simmons' famous 2010 Hall of Fame pyramid. Notice who is firmly locked in at number 2 and number 6. Yep, Bill Russell and Wilt Chamberlain. For decades, it was basically general consensus that the Giants of the 1960s were undisputed, top-tier royalty.
But man, contrast Simmons' 2010 list with the media lists we're seeing today. In a 2022 ESPN article, Russell slid down to number 6 and Chamberlain to 5. In a more recent Clutch Points ranking, Russell literally plummeted to number 11 and Chamberlain to 8. Because there's so little high-quality video of these men playing in their prime, and because the NBA didn't even record blocks as an official stat back then, their monumental legacies are slowly just eroding away with time.
So, what's happening here? The crucial point is that these modern lists suffer massively from subjectivity. We're evaluating legacies based on shifting modern feelings, rather than undeniable historical dominance. What modern rankers often seem to forget is that if you go back to the 1970s, the debate for the greatest basketball player of all time only included 2 men, Bill Russell and Wilt Chamberlain. That's it. No one else was even in the conversation.
This completely highlights why that two-man debate was so intense. It was literally the ultimate stats versus championships argument. For the entire decade of the 1960s, Bill Russell averaged 15 points, 23 rebounds, and led the Celtics to an unfathomable 9 NBA championships. Wilt Chamberlain, on the other hand, averaged 34 points, 25 rebounds, and won exactly 1 championship. 2 totally different but equally staggering types of dominance.
50. Let that sink in for a second. Wilt Chamberlain averaged 50 points per game for an entire season. To modern ears, that sounds totally fake, right? It honestly sounds like a typo in a record book. But it happened.
And the crazy part, Wilt wasn't just a scorer. The guy was putting up literal video game numbers in every single category. He scored 100 points in a single game. He grabbed 55 rebounds in one game. And in 1968, he led the entire league in assists, reportedly just because he wanted to prove he could. Russell, meanwhile, countered all those statistical explosions with unmatched defensive hustle, and of course, those 9 championship rings.
Let's hop back into the time machine and go exactly 60 years into the past, right to the frantic pace of the 1964 NBA Finals. This was the first time these two titans met in the finals, and the scheduling was just brutal. Wilt's Warriors finished an exhausting 7-game series late on April 16th, flew cross-country, and had to play Game 1 on April 18th against Russell's Celtics. Oh, and the Celtics had enjoyed 8 full days of rest.
Predictably, the heavily favored Celtics absolutely whacked the Warriors in blowouts for Games 1 and 2. But the wildest part of Game 2, it perfectly captures the gritty, hyper-physical reality of 1960s basketball. With 9 minutes left in a total blowout, Celtics backup center Clyde Lovellette shoved Wilt Chamberlain. Wilt, who actually rarely lost his temper, but was apparently sick and tired of being pushed around by Lovellette and Russell, punched Lovellette, and I mean, he literally knocked him out cold, right there on the court.
So, let me ask you guys a question. A player just threw a knockout punch in the middle of the NBA Finals. Was Chamberlain ejected from the game? Take a wild guess.
The aftermath is absolutely hilarious and literally unimaginable in today's NBA. Wilt Chamberlain was not ejected, he wasn't given a technical foul. Actually, scratch that, he wasn't called for any foul whatsoever. Instead, because Lovellette was deemed to have instigated the pushing, Chamberlain actually got to go to the free throw line. You really can't make this stuff up.
Naturally, Celtics coach Red Auerbach was absolutely losing his mind, roaring onto the court, demanding an ejection until Bill Russell physically had to pull him away by the arm. But listen to this quote from referee Mendy Rudolph explaining his decision the very next day in a perfectly matter-of-fact tone. Lovellette was the instigator, he fouled Chamberlain first. They had words, and you saw what the big fellow did. He decked him. It perfectly captures just how vastly different the game was officiated and perceived 60 years ago.
But the absolute cherry on top is this post-game exchange. Reporters asked Wilt if it was a good blow, and he just calmly replies, "I kind of missed." Meanwhile, Lovellette told reporters, "I was out for a few seconds." Wilt's terrifying, superhuman strength was so immense that a glancing miss was still enough to render an NBA center entirely unconscious. You know, it's a great reminder that outside of basketball, these men were literal super athletes capable of world-class feats. Back in 1956, Bill Russell was the #2 ranked high jumper in the entire United States. Wilt Chamberlain won the Big 8 high jump title 3 consecutive years while at Kansas. And years later, Arnold Schwarzenegger recalled watching Wilt work out in the gym, noting that Chamberlain literally lifted Arnold up with one arm like nothing. They were absolute physical marvels. Anyway, getting back to the actual basketball in that 1964 series, things shifted dramatically in Game 3 in San Francisco. Wilt dropped a brilliant 35 points and 25 rebounds, blowing out the Celtics 115-91. The Boston Globe's Cliff Keen captured the aftermath beautifully with this quote, describing Coach Red Auerbach blasting his Celtics behind closed doors. The sheer volume of Red's fury bleeding through the locker room walls just paints a vivid picture of exactly how high the stakes were.
Which brings us right back to where we started in this explainer today. When we look at absolute titans like Wilt Chamberlain and Bill Russell, men who broke impossible records, literally knocked out opponents without getting fouled, and dominated the global athletic landscape, we have to ask, is a player's legacy ultimately defined by their undeniable on-court statistics and championships, or is it destined to be slowly eroded by the shifting, subjective memory of modern media rankers? It's definitely a fascinating thought to chew on the next time a controversial top 20 list drops on your timeline. Thanks so much for joining me today, and keep questioning the history behind the stats.